Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Wednesday, December 11th, 2019. On today's episode, we're going to have a writer's room discussion and try to decide on what the 100 best movies of the last decade are. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Managing Editor Jacob Hall.
Hello, hello.
Weekend Editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And Writers Hoai-Tran.
Hey, everyone.
And Chris Evangelista.
Hello, folks.
So this is going to be madness because we all love movies. We all love movies from the last 10 years. And we each submitted our top 100 movies, and we submitted them to Jacob, and he put them together and compiled a list of how many movies did it end up being?
Actually, we all submitted lists of 50 films
or 50
each. Otherwise, if it's
Peter,
100.
did you submit more than we were supposed to? Did you cheat?
Peter did not cheat, I promise. But the fun thing here is that there could have been a maximum total of 300 nominations if each of us submitted 50 different movies. But there was enough crossover that the final list of nominees for the top 100 films of the decade by SlashFilm.com is 163 films. So a little over halfway crossover there, which is very, very interesting. So if you listen to our Writers Room podcast in the past, we're going to follow a similar thing here. Our goal is to end this podcast with 100 films locked in, and we'll figure out the actual order off the air through some blind voting and blind ranking. So here, we're just figuring out the top 100, which means picking 100 films or cutting 63 films, whatever it ends up being. So we're going to have a brief start soon with some initial busy work. But the basic gist of this will be, we're going to go around a circle. Each person is going to pick a movie to try to argue for. And we have a discussion about it, and it either gets put in or it gets temporarily left out. And at the end of this, we'll have a list, and we'll be going along in rotation, and we'll do the best we can to keep this accessible and happy. But you know what? If some people get angry and tempers flare, good dramatic podcast listening, right, guys?
Yes. Should we include this full list in the podcast notes so that people can see the 60-something odd films?
163, yeah. I mean, we theoretically could read the whole list right now, but that's a long list.
Yeah, that would not be compelling to, podcasting. People need to hear me get outvoted for it to be compelling. So... please follow along in the show notes for the complete list. Otherwise, when we announce a new movie, either for consideration or non-consideration, we'll make sure the title is clear so you can follow along as best you can if you're driving, or running or doing something where you can't look at your notes. So I think we should just dive in, guys. But before we officially fully get into the whole meat of this, so arguing, I have a series of yes or no questions for the group. And if anybody says no, that's fine. But I think this will give us a good start. And so if someone says no, it's going to be side-tabled for later?
Yeah. But looking at the list of movies here, there are 4 films that received nominations from all of us, meaning it was on all 6 lists. And one of those movies is Denis Villeneuve's Arrival. So I'm going to propose right now that Arrival gets automatically bumped up into locked in. Does anybody disagree with that notion?
Nope.
All right. While I'm doing this, HT, give us one sentence on why Arrival is a remarkable movie.
We're not putting you on the spot, HT.
I think it's just an ode to the goodness and humanity and how we can be better and better humanity through just optimism and well, hold on. I'm just rambling right now. I don't know what I'm saying. But yeah, it's great.
Tough trying to put it in one sentence.
Yes.
Yeah. Smart, beautiful, humane sci-fi, right, HT?
Beautiful, humane sci-fi, and about how optimism and love can transcend any language barriers.
All right. The next film to receive votes from all of us is Christopher Nolan's Inception. Would anybody disagree with Inception being automatically locked into the top 100?
No. Absolutely not.
Okay, Ben, you sound passionate. Why is Inception a top 100 movie?
I love this movie. It is, I've heard so many complaints about how this movie is just exposition heavy, but I think the audacity and the ambition of the thing overwhelms any nitpicks you might have with the structure. The final, like, I don't know, there's like a 40-minute chunk in the movie where everything is climaxing. All of the different timeline or dream levels are taking place at the same time. The cross-cutting, the editing, the Hans Zimmer score. I mean, everything just works in such perfect concert with one another. Joseph Gordon-Levitt's spinning hallway fight is like one of the craziest things in any action movie that I've seen in a long, long time. So this movie is like so ambitious; it has to be in here.
The next film that received votes from all of us is The Social Network, David Fincher's film, surely known to use The Social Network.
Yes, yeah, this needs to be on there.
Peter, why is The Social Network a great movie?
This is a film. It's a great film. It's fantastically directed. It's one of the best scripts of the last 10 years. But I also think it says something greater about the last decade. It says something about a generation. It says something about our world. That score is just amazing. I listen to that score every week. Like that score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross is just like kick-ass. There's not enough good things I could say about this movie.
Yeah, I think this is one of the best movies of the past decade for sure. And speaking of that, the last film to receive votes from all of us is a controversial one, Star Wars: The Last Jedi. And I know this one may rank differently on people's personal lists, but I think we all agree it's in the top 100, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'll say this one. I'll be the one to send this one off. And I think Rian Johnson did a brave thing. This is a brave film in that he made a Star Wars movie that interrogates Star Wars, that dissects Star Wars. And I don't think we'll ever see a movie quite like it again due to the mixed reaction. I think the people may try to play Star Wars as safe, enjoyable, wonderful, warm junk food from now on. And The Last Jedi represents this period where something truly bold happened in the most popular franchise of all time, and I'm continually thrilled by it.
By the way, I don't think things have to be on either side of that equation, Jacob. They don't need to be bold, subversive, or be not challenging in the least. They just need to be in the middle somewhere.
All right, fair, Peter. All right, so going on to the next tier before we break this up, films that received nominations from all but one of us, I think, could possibly be bumped up automatically. And the first of these is Jordan Peele's Get Out. This is on my personal list. And I'm not sure who did not vote for it, but since 5 of us voted for it, can we all agree that maybe Get Out should get bumped right up?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Chris, why is Get Out going on this list?
I mean, Get Out is sort of like a phenomenon. It kind of I felt like it came out of nowhere, and it was Jordan Peele's first feature directorial film, and no one really knew what to expect. And it came and it blew everyone away because not only was it a very cool genre picture, not only was it a very cool horror movie, it also had something to say. It was this very biting, sharp social commentary, and it proved that you can still make horror movies that say something. Don't get me wrong. I love dumb, pointless, violent horror movies, but whenever there's a horror movie that actually has something to say, I get very excited because it shows how far-reaching the genre can be when people take it seriously.
All right. The next film that we have received 5 out of 6 nominations is our second David Fincher film of the called Pat Cost already, and that's Gone Girl. Would anyone here be opposed to Gone Girl be automatically bumped up?
No.
Nope.
Mm-mm. All right, Brad, I heard you speak up first. Why is Gone Girl great?
Much in the same way that The Social Network has more to say than just being about the founding of Facebook, Gone Girl is something more than just what on the surface feels like a somewhat trashy thriller. David Fincher provides commentary on the state of media and the justice system and the portrayal of how people must seem in the media as far as like becoming depicted in a way that is gives them sympathy and makes them appear like they shouldn't be convicted of crimes and things like this. And on top of that, it kind of has this nuanced commentary and portrayal of marriage as well, albeit in a very twisted sort of way. And so there's a lot of layers to it, and I think that it's just a very smart movie.
Your pitch for this, Brad, makes me want to rewatch this film. I loved it when it came out, but I don't think I've watched it since, the Time's Up, Me Too movement started. Not that is directly related to this film, but I feel like it might view it in a different eyes after, in today's society.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it since it came out, I would definitely recommend rewatching it because it's a great movie.
Okay, the next film with 5 nominations out of the 6 of us is Pixar's Inside Out, my pick for the best Pixar film of them all. So that's where I stand. This one should go right up there. Who disagrees or agrees?
That should definitely be in there.
Ooh, Peter.
Oh, wow.
Whoa. What?
I mean, maybe if the top 100 of the last 10 years, yeah, sure.
Maybe the list we're actually putting together right now. Maybe.
I don't know. I'm quite agree that it's the best Pixar movie ever made. The claim that Jacob said, but
No, it is.
HT, why is Inside Out going up to the top 100?
Inside Out was an interesting Pixar movie because it was one of the first to present a story with no villain, and instead it went into the psyche and the inner workings of this young girl's mind, and manifested the idea of like emotions as actual talking, living, breathing things, and it was able to give a tangible feeling to the idea of this greater sense of emotion than what other Pixar movies have had accomplished before. That happy, sad, that idea that nothing has to be one or the other, that the idea that there's something more to life than just being one emotion. And that's what I think Inside Out achieves so well.
All right. The next one is a film that I thought for sure would get 6 nominations, but only had 5, and that is Mad Max Fury Road, which has to be in our top 100, right, guys? It has to be.
Yes.
No. I'm not even kidding on this one. I'm not a fan of.
Did you really leave this off your list? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, no, I'm not a fan of Mad Max. I feel like there's no story here. The action is incredible. Like visually, it's amazing, but like as a story, it's there's nothing there. And I know I'm in the minority here in this world.
Jesus. The fact that the story is so simple is half of what makes this movie so great. It doesn't need to be complex. Like on the surface, yeah, sure, it's just a big long chase, but there's so much more to it because of the characters like Furiosa and on all.
I don't think that she has much to her either. I really.
You're a monster.
What is deceptive in its simplicity, Peter? It's something that challenges the audience, but also lets them.
How does it challenge the audience? It's just like action. It's more than the action. That's the thing. It allows the story to build from the moments in between and from like what is unsaid. And that's what's so powerful about it, is that it's not just hand-holding the audience by giving you tons of exposition about where these characters are and where they come from, but it allows you to sort of live with these characters and get to know them through their actions. So I feel like there's
kind of
less
storytelling is something.
There's less character like in this than there is in like the worst Marvel movies. Like I really
that's preposterous.
Untrue.
Right. Okay, Peter, I'm gonna be straight with you here. Is this a battle you want to pick? Out of all the battles we have coming up today.
No, but like the thing is, I could just go along and say yes, but like you're asking me, do I believe this should be in the top 100? I honestly don't believe this should be in the top 100.
Okay.
Peter, okay, hang on real quick before you start, Jacob. Just on a sheer technical and like a virtuosity level, you don't believe that it should be in there. I understand that you have problems with the narrative. I actually have some problems with the narrative myself.
I do believe on the technical level, cinematography, how things were accomplished. Yes, it is amazing, but I feel like I'm going to lose some battles for things that were on that level that others here aren't going to agree with me because they weren't made by an auteur, with the last name Miller.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Jacob.
All right. I will happily move this up into the discussed section instead of our locked in section. I just feel like at the end of the day,
I know I'm going to lose this, but
at the end of the day, I think we'll save us a lot of heartache and headache if we just put it in the top 100 right now.
I already have a headache.
Brad, you always have a headache.
That's true. I do get headaches pretty frequently.
Okay. So, Peter, do I have your permission to put it in the top 100, even though you don't support it, but the rest of us do, so we can have other fights later on?
Fine, okay. Do it.
All right. The But the next one I know for a fact Peter likes, and it has also received 5 votes from us. And that's Bong Joon-ho's Parasite, one of the most recent films on the list. And Peter, you think this one should be there, right?
Yes. I don't think I'm the right person to make the pitch for this, Jacob, because I think you are like the one out of all of us. Like, you think this should be like one of the top films of the decade, period, right?
Yeah, I think it's in the top 10, maybe even top 5. I think it's the best film I've seen in a couple of years. And Bong Joon-ho he's just master auteur of shifting genres. You're never quite sure what Parasite is until it reveals itself. It's a thriller, a dark comedy, a satire, and ultimately just this truly powerful tragedy. And to talk about what it's about, I feel like it's almost spoiling it because it's still a recent film and not a lot of people have a chance to see it yet. But it is just this. It's if Alfred Hitchcock, who's notoriously cynical, that level of thriller skill applied to a film with a social message that stings and feels so incredibly important and powerful to this decade in particular. So, is anyone here opposed to Parasite? I know somebody here didn't put it on their list.
Who didn't put? Wait, can we call the person like who didn't put it on the list? Was it me?
It might have been me.
No, it must have been on my list because it was in my top 10 of this year.
I think it was Chris. Sorry to call you, probably put you out there, Chris. But
no, it's fine. I think it's a great movie. I don't think it's. I think it's the best movie, one of the best movies of this year, the year 2019. I don't know if I would say it's the best. It's not even like my favorite Bong movie of the decade, so I don't think I could put it up there.
His favorite Bong movie is A Very Harold and Kumar Christmas.
Yes, no, it's
I will agree with Chris that the ending of the movie isn't as strong as the rest of the movie, and I do think some of its social political what it's trying to get at is a little heavy-handed, but I do think it's one of the 10 best movies of this year, and if you can't get one of the 10 best movies of this year on the list of the 100, then that's tough.
I actually will disagree with you about the last 10 minutes because I think that those last 10 minutes solidify the message that Parasite in particular is trying to say.
We should have a discussion of this at some later point. But I'm just saying logically that last 10 minutes does not make any sense. But that's as far as I'll go without spoiling anything for anybody.
Even though I don't have it on my list, I don't have any objections. So
all right, I'm going to lock Parasite in. The next one I want to present is an automatic move up. With 5 votes, is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's on my list, too. I think it's another one of Chris was the only holdout here. And even then, Chris likes this movie a lot.
It's great. It's a great movie. It's not, not my best of the decade.
What Chris is saying is it's not cinema.
That's right. I think it's good. It's. Yeah. I have no objections. I just wouldn't include it with my list. Because my list is the better one.
Well, while I do this, Ben, give us a few sentences on why Into Spider-Verse is the best superhero movie of all time.
I mean, anybody can wear the mask. That's like the big message of this movie, not just a clean-cut white guy like it had been for so long. I think the movie is, maybe more than any other film this side of like Scott Pilgrim versus the World, it feels like a comic book that's come to life. And that the visual style, Lord and Miller's like signature humor, all of that kind of stuff is like what makes the movie amazing on a surface level. But there's also this really like a palpable pain in these characters, and we can appreciate the cleverness and all that stuff, which I certainly do. But I think there's like a real a beating heart to this movie that is not present in a lot of other superhero movies, let alone animated ones.
All right, going from a completely opposite direction, our last film to receive 5 votes is Martin Scorsese's The Wolf of Wall Street. I think the movie's a masterpiece, so I'm for this one being bumped right up. Who is against it?
Nope, not against it. Now that's what I call cinema.
I think I'm the one who didn't have it on my list, but I'm not opposed to it. I'm sorry. I guess I booed Chris earlier for Parasite, so I deserve it. Whatever.
But guys, do we want to support a movie that has dwarf tossing in it?
I mean, Lord of the Rings has dwarf tossing in it.
That was a joke. I'm sorry.
Chris, why is Wolf of Wall Street a great movie?
It rules. That's all. That's what else more do I have to say? It's amazing. No, it had. Scorsese made this in his 70s, and it has more energy and more life than movies from filmmakers, half his age, and it just shows that He's unbeatable, man. He's gonna live forever in my mind.
All right, we're almost done with my opening shtick here. Then get into the real meat. I want to go through the last few films that received more than half nominations from the group. So with 4 nominations, Blade Runner 2049. This is on my list, and I think it deserves to be bumped up. But I want to hear from you guys.
Yes.
I didn't hear a yes from Ben and Peter, so this wasn't on your guys' list.
It was not on my list, but I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I think it's one of those movies that I didn't love when I first saw it, but the more I think about it, the more I like it. It was, I guess it just had so much, like the weight of so many expectations on its shoulders when it first debuted. But like thinking back on that movie, I think back at all of the gorgeous cinematography, the beautiful imagery there, and like the pain and the wandering of the Ryan Gosling character. I like the movie a lot. I don't necessarily love it enough to have put it on my list.
Actually, it had to be Peter or Chris that one of them put it on there because it's not on my list.
Yeah, it is on my list. And,
there we go.
Yeah, so is Brad, why didn't you put it on your list?
I really liked Blade Runner 2049, don't get me wrong. But I don't know, part of me felt like it was almost just a little too late. And while I think the visuals are stunning and I like Ryan Gosling in the role and I like what they did with Harrison Ford's return, it just didn't sit with me in a way where I fell in love with it. And so while I thought it was very good and I was satisfied with it, it wasn't enough for me to put it in my own top 50 of the decade.
All right, so here's my question for Ben and Brad. Considering the fights we have ahead of us, and this one having the support of 2/3 of the group, are you okay with this one being bumped up, or do you want to save the fight for later?
I'm okay with it going on there. That's fine with me.
Yeah, I don't know.
100 movies is a lot of movies. I feel like this one, I don't know.
Oh, that's true. Oh, we are making a list of 100, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Then yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine with it being bumped up. Then I was thinking that it was 50. So since it's 100, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll speak for Blade Runner here. I think this is a near perfect sequel. It understands what makes the original special in terms of tone, but it's also not afraid to venture off and do its own thing and be relevant for a new age. And it is just this methodical, dreamlike, sinister science fiction that baffles many people as Bewitched, but I'm very much in the Bewitched category.
Can I actually say something too to
Of
add
course.
to that?
Yeah.
So Blade Runner 2049 is a rare sequel in that it made the original better in my esteem, because I was actually not a fan of the original Blade Runner. But I think Blade Runner 2049 was able to answer the questions that the original Blade Runner put forward and never really got around to answering. The idea of like what makes a human, what makes what constitutes humanity. And I really loved its exploration of that. I had my criticisms with it too, of course, with its use of sort of Asian cultures as a background to the action. But I do think that it's such a beautiful exploration of humanity in a way that is ultimately really sad.
All right. Move on to a very different type of science fiction. The exact opposite type of science fiction. Spike Jonze's Her received 4 votes. I adore this movie, so I want to hear from somebody who thinks it does not belong on this list.
I really liked it at the time. I don't think I put it on my list, but I don't necessarily have any great reason to to tear this movie down in any way. I just didn't. There were other things that outranked it for me. So I don't know. Does anybody else have feel more passionately negative about Her?
No, that's pretty much where I stood too. I'm the other person who didn't put it on my list, and I'm pretty much where you are. Where I did enjoy it when it came out. I even think it might have been one of my favorites that year, at least in the top 15. But it just wasn't enough to push it to my top 50.
I love this movie to death. I think that as our relationship with technology grows and changes, I don't think any film this decade better captured the sadness, but also the joy of the connections we make in a digital landscape. I think this movie is a beautiful thing. Would anybody be opposed to it being bumped up?
I would not.
No.
Nope.
I'm fine.
All right, the next one is one that I did not vote for, but I'm totally understand if you want to be bumping up. This is Scott Pilgrim vs. the World with 4 votes. I adore this movie, but I didn't vote for it. So you guys take the floor. Who wants to talk to someone else?
I will fight for this movie to the absolute death. I think this movie deserves so much more credit than it's gotten, and it's already gotten a fair amount of credit. But I think this movie is such a brilliant approach to relationships and breakups, and it does so in such an original way by utilizing video game aesthetics and comic book style. And Edgar Wright's signature humor is there to make it even better. The cast is outstanding. It's just, there's so many great things about it. I think that it's one of the most original movies I think that we have seen in this decade. Granted, it's based on a graphic novel, but it's still an original presentation, of that kind of story.
Yeah. Also, the graphic novel is just so kind of innovative in its own way as well, so it feels like fresh.
Yeah, I have zero issues with this movie bumped up. I didn't vote for it, but I also feel like Edgar Wright is a remarkable filmmaker, and this movie is speaking a very specific language that only come to the fruition, cinematic speaking, this decade. Who's the other person who didn't put it on here? Was it you, Chris?
Yeah, I do not have it on my list.
Ooh!
Wow. I hate this movie, actually.
Oh, really?
Oh, no.
This is the only Edgar Wright movie I don't like.
Wow, really, Chris? Why don't you like this movie?
I mean, I like this. It's got great style. It's well directed. I don't think Edgar Wright can make a badly directed movie at this point. But even though I don't normally dislike Michael Cera, I find him insufferable in this movie, and I don't want him to get ahead at all. I know that's part of his character arc is learning that he's a shitty boyfriend, but I don't want to spend a whole movie with that shitty boyfriend. Like, I just wanted him I wanted him to die, basically, and I wanted Mary Elizabeth Winstead to get a better boyfriend because, God, he sucks in this movie so much. But I understand that people love it, and it's just not for me, and that's fine. I will not fight it, even though I really don't care for this film.
All right, I'm going to bump it up.
So I think that's the first film that we've mentioned that someone outright hates.
Yeah.
Mad Max for you.
No. I admired the cinematic, like the action and stuff. I just think as a story, it's nothing.
All right. This movie is a slash film favorite. I know it made our top 10 of the year when it came out. It's a little under the radar. It's Sing Street. It got 4 nominations from us, and I didn't vote for this, but I think this movie's a lovely, lovely thing. So I'm not opposed to it being on the list. Who's a big Sing Street fan here?
I know me and Peter are. Yeah. Oh yeah, Ben is too. That's right.
Yeah, Ben, tell us about Sing Street.
Sing Street is glorious. It's basically it's a movie about a kid in 1980s Dublin who decides to form a band in order to impress a girl, and it's all about like on the surface it sort of appears to be about the creation of music and this romance between this boy and this girl, and all of that stuff is great, and the music is wonderful. It's from John Carney, who directed Once, which is this really small indie musical, and this sort of like crystallizes all of his thoughts about the world. It's like quasi autobiographical based on his experiences in life, and it's really great on this one level. But I think there's also a separate engine to this movie, which is the relationship between the musician and his brother, who is played by what is his name, Jack Rayner, who is so good in this movie, and the brotherly relationship I think is really at the core of this thing. There's so much that I could say about that. I think I'm actually going to write about it a little bit in some of my favorite moments of the year list, which is a separate list that we're doing on Slash Film. So if you want to read more about that, you can do that once that list is published. But man, I really love this movie.
Chris, were you the one who let this off other than me?
I have not seen Sing Street, so that's why it's not on my list.
Whoa!
Oh my goodness. Chris, I think you would really enjoy Sing Street.
I don't have time. I have to rewatch The Irishman again. I don't have time to watch.
So as someone who also didn't vote for it, I'm cool moving it up. I think Sing Street is a truly beautiful thing. It didn't make my personal list, but I have zero qualms with it being in our top 100.
And Chris, Sing Street is about a real Irishman.
All right. Okay, the last film before I open the floor to everybody. The last film with 4 votes, and that is Whiplash. And holy hell, I love this movie, guys.
Yes.
Who doesn't love
Whiplash? Who can fight?
I didn't put it on my list. I do think it's really well directed. It's just one of those movies that's sort of like faded from my mind over. Like, I remember when I saw it, I was like, man, that was amazing. And then like the more distance I got between it, the more I was like, I don't ever need to see that again.
I'm like Chris on this. I put it on my list, but like I feel like I have not thought about it since the year it came out.
Man, you guys really need to watch it again, because this was a movie that like I saw it opening night at Sundance, And I remember thinking, wow, that's great. And as the festival went on, nothing really like topped it for me that year. And I kept thinking that as the year went on, I was like, this movie was so good. And like, am I crazy for like still holding on to it? But it just is that great. I've watched this movie several times since it came out. I love showing it to people for the first time. I just think that it's the dynamic between J.K. Simmons and Miles Teller is so great and tense, and both of their performances are outstanding, and the music is fantastic too. The score and the music that the band plays. So yeah, I love this movie so much.
And by the way, when you fall in love with something at Sundance, like one of your favorite films of the year, it's like the worst, because it basically means that by December you're still like nothing has beaten it. Like you started off the year great and nothing like was able to topple it.
Well, I'm also very strongly on Team Whiplash. This movie, few films have captured the pain of the creative process like this, and the abusive relationship of the abusive relationship between artists and mentors, and just the entire last 10 minutes is brutal. And it worked. And the look on J.K. Simmons' face when last time you seen the last shot of J.K. Simmons, where you can't tell if he's angry or proud, remains one of my favorite reaction shots in all of modern cinema. I love this movie.
Yeah, I vote for it being on there.
Oh man, I don't know. I feel like I want to fight this, even though I don't think it's a bad movie. I just also don't know if I would like. I would say like First Man. If we're picking like a oh god, what the hell is his name?
Damien Chazelle.
Damien Chazelle. If we're picking like one of his movies, I would say First Man belongs on this list more than this. But everyone feels so strong about this. I don't.
Well,
wanna...
I'm on your team, Chris, because I.
All right.
Oh yeah, I also saw it and I really loved it when I did see it in theaters. But I think it was more for the performances. I think it was a really great performance vehicle and it was well directed. But it's something that I haven't really thought of since I saw it way back when. So I don't know. I think it's fine. I do think it's stronger for the performances than anything.
How can you say that? How can you say that about First Man though, when First Man isn't on any of our lists?
Yeah, I know.
I don't think I put any Damien Chazelle movies on the list, but if I had to pick one, it would be First Man.
Should we table this or should we approve it? Like, what should we do?
I'm going to table Whiplash. There's too much controversy around the circle of this one.
Ooh, you sons of bitches!
So, moving Whiplash.
You might say we have some whiplash around this movie.
Ooh.
Okay. Now we're going.
HT with the pun.
So we have 15 movies already locked in. So 15% of the way there, guys.
Oh my God! How many more do we have to put on here?
85 more.
And by the way, these 15 movies were the ones that we pretty much agreed upon.
Yeah, these were the easy ones.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to go around a circle now. Each of us is going to nominate a movie, and we all have to either approve it or not. And if we disapprove of it, that person has to pick another movie until we approve it. We go on to the next person. So
if you remember last year, there was a point where I think I like named 4 movies before I got a movie approved. Yeah. So it's gonna be fun.
All right, but random order I built beforehand. Ben, you're getting us started. Which film belongs in our top 100?
Before I select, I have a question about how does this work if some people on this podcast have not seen the films in question yet? Like,
your description of the film must sell them on the film based on the description. Is how we're going about this. Like, if I had not seen Wolf of Wall Street, I would say, tell me about it. Why does this film matter to you? And if your argument wins me over, that's one thing.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, let me think. I think I'm gonna pick a movie that I love from this year, and I'm gonna say Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which I think should be definitely in the top 100 movies of this past decade. This is a movie directed by Céline Sciamma. It is a French film about this woman who is a painter who goes to an island to paint this other woman who is like notorious. She's about to be married, and the whole construct of the film is like this woman who's about to be married has to have her portrait done so it can be sent ahead to her husband. And it's this big metaphor for like the end of her creative life as an individual. And it's all about like taking this next step into marriage. And this woman who has to have her portrait painted is very resistant to this idea. So a previous painter has come and she has like made that person's life hell and didn't even allow them to actually paint her. So this new painter comes and is trying to capture this person's portrait without them knowing about it. So it's all about the act of looking, and the camera is like roving around, and you get a lot of POV shots of like small portions of this person's face that the artist needs to remember for later. And it is such a profoundly powerful love story that develops over the course of the film. I don't want to say too much about it because it hasn't really come out yet. It's out in limited release in LA and New York right now. It comes out on Valentine's Day next year, but it technically qualifies for this list and end of the year lists. So God, it is, like, the performances are outstanding. The cinematography is like some of the most beautiful I've seen in a long, long time. The music is great. It is just it's like everything I want in a heart swelling romance movie. It's like devastating in all of the right ways, and the final couple minutes of the movie are just like some of the most moving, emotional, profound moments I've had in a theater in the past 10 years. So I feel like this movie should be on the list.
Ben, I haven't seen this, but I've been talking to you about it for a few weeks now. You've been talking about it on the podcast and off the podcast. And in the years we've been working together, I don't think I've ever seen you this passionate about a film. So unless there's like some strident opposition, I think you alone can boost top 100. But who else has seen this? I think HT has seen this, right?
I have seen it, and I love it. I didn't include it on my top movies of the decade because while it's one of my favorite movies of the year, I don't know if it's that high up in my like decade list. But everything that Ben says is correct. It's a movie that this is a phrase that has been like cheesy and memeified now, but it really is the definition of poetic cinema. Every shot looks like a portrait, and it's something that takes that title to heart so well, and it feels like it condenses so many years of like love poems and tragic love affairs into this 2-hour film in a way that does feel like so just transporting. I will say that when I saw it, I felt so many similarities to Call Me by Your Name that the films sometimes overlap in terms of like how much I really enjoy them, especially in the final shot of both films. But yeah, I'm not opposed to it being on the top 100. It's not my choice personally, but everything that Ben says is correct.
Chris, I know you just saw this. Do you think it belongs on the top 100?
No.
Chris, you're killing me.
No, I can go in there. I don't. Life has beaten me down. I don't want to fight that much. Let's just leave it on there.
We're only like 30 minutes into this podcast. How are you?
It's been a long week. I'm just glad today's Friday.
All right. Would anybody, based on Ben's pitch, I'm okay, but bump this up. Brad and Peter, are you guys okay based on Ben's word and HD's word?
I haven't seen it yet, and it doesn't look like it's going to be very good. I'm cautious about just okaying putting it on the list. Granted, even though we have 100, with only 2 people fully supporting it so far.
All right, I'll put it in discussion for now, but we'll table it for now. It doesn't mean it's off the table, but it means we talked about it. Ben, go ahead and nominate another movie, and we'll come back to Portrait Lady on Fire.
Okay. Let's see. Let me look through my list here. How about Guardians of the Galaxy? That's a fun one. I don't know if that one had multiple votes. Oh, it does. I see it had 3 votes.
It has 3 votes, and this is the one Marvel movie on this list I guaranteed believe should be on there.
Yeah, I feel like I'm picking this one because I know I shouldn't get too much of a fight here. I think James Gunn is an interesting sort of indie filmmaker before he stepped into this, and he retained his voice. This is one of the few Marvel movies and I guess Marvel like sub franchises that really, really, really feels like it has an auteur behind it. It's coming from a specific person's point of view instead of a sort of a committee kind of thing. And that's saying that's coming from somebody who likes most of the Marvel movies. But I think Guardians of the Galaxy, we can talk about the ensemble cast, which is amazing, and like Dave Bautista, who was known as a wrestler before this, but has like slowly become one of the most like sort of joyful presences in Hollywood cinema as like one of these huge like bulking sort of beefy guys. I never would have thought that Dave Bautista would have been, considered a legitimate movie star, but here we are. And yeah, I think the movie's ultimate message about like the power of friendship, it can be so cheesy, like you were saying earlier. Somebody, HT, I think, was talking about the cheese factor. I think this movie, in the wrong hands, could have been a total disaster, but I think it's the music, the way that the score was chosen, the soundtrack, all those songs on the awesome mix, and the magic that forms when all of those elements come together resulted in something really special. So I like this movie a lot.
It didn't make my list, but when I think back in the last decade of like the pop culture landscape, Guardians is a titan in that landscape, and I cannot deny it being on this list.
There's not many movies that I would fight like hand and teeth to get on this list other than Guardians. Like, this needs to be on there in my mind.
And it's also interesting too from like an industry perspective. This was like arguably one of the first really big swings from Marvel in a post-Avengers landscape. So, and it paid off. It's a movie about a talking tree, and people were freaking out because nobody knew anything about these characters before, but we were instantly pulled into that world. And I think the casting had a lot to do with that, and the James Gunn's script and everything too. So I think it was just a huge, it went about as well as it could have gone, and I think for all of us to still be thinking about it years later and looking back fondly on it says a lot.
Yeah,
I think. Oh, sorry,
I was going to say, I think people look back on that film like it was like an obvious hit. But, like, it was not. I remember us reporting on that film and everybody being like, what is this? There's a talking tree. Like, people were not immediately sold on Guardians. And the fact that it has become, for this generation, what Star Wars was for the generation before it, I feel like, earns its way onto this list.
Mm-hmm.
All right. HT, I hear you have words in your mouth.
What? Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yeah, I feel you have words to say.
Oh, yes, you were calling me out for not including this on my list. I liked Guardians of the Galaxy a lot when it came out, but it kind of has fallen in my sort of like regard since I saw it. But I can't deny the impact that it has on pop culture. I do think that some of the jokes, particularly the more sexist ones, don't really play over as well for me as they did. But I'm fine with it being on the list. It's fine.
All right, Chris, let's hear it.
No, I actually think Guardians 2 is the better movie, but I feel like that movie wouldn't, like, that's one of those sequels that needs this movie to exist. So I didn't include this on my list, but I do think it is an important film. Like, if I had to pick one Marvel movie for this list, it would definitely be this. So, yes.
All right. Guardians, you're on top 100. And speaking of Chris, you get to pick the next one.
I'm going to go with Under the Skin, which is Jonathan Glazer's fever dream nightmare starring Scarlett Johansson as an alien. This is like top like 3 for me of the decade. It's just such a unique, weird, haunting movie that I've never seen a movie like this before or since. It's almost like, it sounds like a cop out, but it's almost like unclassifiable, this film, because it's just so otherworldly. Like, it's everything about this movie, every frame, every scene is just so out of this world. Like, I can't remember the last time a movie like blew me away like this. I remember seeing this in the theater before like anyone was really talking. I just like saw it on a whim, and I was just completely floored because it was so mind-boggling and odd. And this was like before like A24 had become, that indie powerhouse it is today, where they're like, every time they come out with a movie, it inspires 8 billion memes. Like, this was like the beginning of A24. So no one was really talking about them as much at the time. And I was just so caught off guard. And it's one of those movies that's like always stuck with me, from, the direction, the cinematography, to the Mika Levy's score, which is like so abnormal and atonal and creepy. It's just, I don't know. This movie is phenomenal to me, and I would very much fight for it to be on the list somewhere.
You know,
Chris is right. I can't shake this movie. It's been lodged in me since I saw it. I can't shake it off.
and I was going to say that score and also like those scenes that they do have been like imitated and inspired. Like the inspiration of this film has been copied and imitated by Stranger Things. Like I feel like that whole sequence of when Eleven looks into the Upside Down is totally influenced by that film, and its influence has been felt in a big major way.
Yes, Peter is right.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna pose that right now. Chris and Peter being on the same page is a magical thing, and I think that alone deserves Under the Skin being promoted to the top 100.
Does anyone dislike? I can understand disliking the movie, but does anyone not think it belongs on the list? I admit it's a very weird movie, so I could get not liking it. But does anyone not want it on here? I guess is the question.
I've had this in my Netflix queue since 2013, and I've not actually watched it yet, so I can't comment. But from everything you guys have said, it sounds like it belongs in our group list for sure.
All right. I'm bumping Under the Skin into our top 100. Welcome, Jonathan Glazer. That movie is, oh man, Ben, I want to hear your thoughts. It's something else. All right, but next up is Peter. What do you nominate, Peter?
Okay, so the whole game of this, guys, is tough because do I try to push for a movie that I want to fight for at this point, or do I try to get something that I think is easy to get in? And it's a tough game of this whole writer's room thing. But you know what? I honestly think I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to go honest here, and I'm not going to play underhanded and go for a movie I want to get on from down below that I don't think is going to. I'm going to go with one of my favorite films of the last 10 years. And I'm not sure. I don't think this is going to be an easy hit either. But Star Wars: The Force Awakens. I think this film was massive. This is the rebirth of Star Wars for a new generation. This is brought new characters. It brought a female hero to the forefront of Star Wars for the first time on live action, big screen. And J.J. Abrams, you can say what you will, that it is playing the hits and it's trying to recapture the magic, but I think it's doing what it needed to do. And these heroes are the people that I see on T-shirts every day as I walk the streets. And, alongside, Groot and Rocket. And, I know we already have a Star Wars movie on this list. And I know that we're probably not going to have another one after this on this list. We should say that we're recording this at a time that we have not seen the third installment of the sequel trilogy. So that will not be in contention here. But I really feel like this film deserves to be, not only is it, monumental in it breaking records and stuff, but it's a film that everybody I know has seen, more times in the theater than they can count on one hand. And it's a moment in time. It's something special. It's a story that resonates. It asks questions that people debated and speculated about for years until another movie came out and said those questions didn't matter. I don't know. I really think for me, The Force Awakens is a really special film.
I think the first 45 minutes belong in our top 100. Beyond that, I get a little skeptical. But Peter's really passionate about this one, and I do believe that this list should be representative of movies we're in consensus on, as well as movies that individuals are incredibly passionate about. So even though it chafes me a little bit to say it was top 100, I will give Peter my sword here because I know this movie matters to him, and this list is about us, it is individuals. But I think Brad also put this on your list, right?
Yes, I did. And I believe in it much in the same way that Peter does. This was not an easy task for J.J. Abrams to take on. And while he does tap a lot into reviving details from the original trilogy and retreading them, I do agree with Peter about how the introduction of those new characters is something that was not easy. And for people to love them so quickly and fiercely and to have characters who are now immediately part of Star Wars history and that people really truly enjoy is a feat in itself. And I think that there's great stuff in this movie. Like, aside from just how Kylo Ren is handled as a villain, from the choice to leave Luke Skywalker completely out of the story and really focus in on those new characters and give us something to latch onto that isn't simply, all the old heroes back together doing what they did before. I love Harrison Ford's role as Han Solo in this movie. There's a lot to like about it, and while I don't think that it is as good as The Last Jedi, I think this movie accomplishes so much and is so well done for how big the legacy of Star Wars is and how much it means to people that it deserves to be one of the best of the decade.
Can I respond to the first 45-minute comment?
Yeah, sure.
I know that the ending, the Starkiller base, is not the best moments of this film. To me, it's the Canto Bite of this movie. But it does have a lightsaber battle, which I think the more and more I think about it, I think the lightsaber battle at the core of this film that takes place outside on Starkiller Base is my favorite lightsaber battle of the whole entire franchise. And the reason why is because there's emotional stakes. There is a story being told there about Rey. It's the lightsaber battle in Last Jedi might be a better choreographed battle, but I feel like emotionally I'm not as connected to it.
Yeah, I think Peter's right about that. I mean, I think the Last Jedi lightsaber battle kicks ass, but there's such close personal intensity to Kylo Ren and Rey's duel that I can get behind that. So I want to hear from the deafening silence of Ben, HT, and Chris.
Look, I mean, we have a Star Wars movie on this list, so if you say yes to Portrait of a Lady on Fire, I'll say yes to Force Awakens.
But by the way, Ben, I did not say no to Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Like, no one asked me, so.
And I'm not saying no either. Actually, Peter, you were asked. You just didn't say anything.
Because it's such okay. The whole thing of like having to say yes or no to a movie you haven't seen is like tough. So like I would rather like abstain than say no because I don't know. Everything I've heard about that movie is great, but like I haven't seen it, so like I don't know. It's very tough. Like I know Jacob makes it sound easy that like Ben convinced me and then say yes, but like it's very hard when you haven't seen the movie.
I was very good at listening.
Yeah, we're all in service of a larger group list, so.
But I will say this: like I was quiet because I was not going to say no. Do you know what I mean? Like you made a passionate plea for that movie, and that was like there's no way for me to say no to what you had said, despite the fact that I have not even seen the trailer for the movie.
Right. I mean, I'm partially kidding, but I want to hear what HT and Chris have to say about Force Awakens.
No, I love Force Awakens. I think it has big script problems. Last Jedi is a better movie in pretty much every way, but Force Awakens is incredibly entertaining, and the characters are so much fun, and that lightsaber battle is great. I still remember, the feeling of how amazing it was that shot. It's easy to forget this, but the way that movie was marketed, we actually didn't realize Rey was the main character. Like Finn was all over the marketing for that film, and there was even like a poster where Finn had a lightsaber in his hand, so everyone thought, oh, he's the main character. And there's that moment at the end where Rey uses the Force to make the lightsaber like fly into her hands, and I was like, oh, that rules! Like the way they shot that. So. While I think Last Jedi is the better movie and I would fight for that over this, I would not like strongly stand against this being on the list either.
Here's a question for you guys. Does it have to be either or?
No, it doesn't.
No, you're right.
And I feel like that's what's become...
But I also...
Star Wars.
I also feel like we're going to get to a point where it's like, we're running out of, as hard as it is to believe now, because we won't get there for another 10 hours. We're going to get to a point where we're going to be like, we're running out of room. What are we going to have to cut? So I'm trying to pick my battles early, I guess. But I'm also not against this being on the list.
Yeah, for me, like I said, not on my list, but this is a group list. This is about us. And this movie matters so much to Peter and to Brad that I think to keep it off is not a fight I want to have, because I know there are movies that matter to me in the same way this matters to Peter and Brad. Sorry, I keep leaving Brad out of that. He's voting for it.
I will say that I really enjoyed Star Wars Force Awakens when it came out, and I do think that some of it has faded in my mind since I last saw it, but it is a wildly entertaining movie. And it did have such an impact on pop culture, especially in the sort of vein of legacy sequels that would follow it, movies that mine nostalgia for sort of new cultural phenomenon. And while I do think it relies heavy on that nostalgia and hitting those same beats, it does make something new out of like that. Those old notes creates a new song out of it. So what I'm saying is I also don't mind it being on the list, but I do worry that we'll at some point have to battle over being 2 Star Wars movies on the list and other spots being taken.
Mostly I was kidding earlier. I feel like this is slash film. Of course, there's going to be 2 Star Wars movies on this list, and I'm just honestly glad that it's not like Rogue One or Solo that we're talking about, because I really liked Force Awakens also. Daisy really rules, just period across the board. So I'm fine with that being on this list.
All right, look at that, Peter. Your first submission. It's
Yes. Can we play like the celebration music? The John? No, we'll get like a copyright suit or something.
All right, HT, you're up next.
All right. I am going to go with Call Me By Your Name.
Oh, yes.
A movie I deeply, deeply love. It's this wonderful snapshot of a gauzy summer love that feels both fleeting and infinite at the same time. And I feel like that it captures that that tempestuous feeling of first love so well, while feeling like this dream world, like you're drifting in someone else's dream. And of course, the performances are just pitch perfect. Timothée Chalamet, Armie Hammer, and of course,
Michael Stuhlbarg.
Michael Stuhlbarg. When I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like, wait, yeah, Michael Stuhlbarg, who gives one of the best speeches in cinematic history, and just made me cry my eyes out. Call Me by Your Name. It's just a movie that I think very much deserves a spot on this list.
This movie moved me tremendously, and there's a whole tragic subgenre that I'm always attracted to, which is movies about romances and relationships where somebody meets their soulmate, but they can't be with them. And not in a, like, oh, they're dying or being torn away from me, but in a, this logistically cannot work. And Call Me By Your Name is probably the best version of that, because it is a coming-of-age story where the coming of age comes from a romance that defines who this person is. It defines who Timothée Chalamet's character is, even though it's never going to last. And that's the point, is that, not everything that's great lasts. And also, this list needs a shot of gay in it. We need some queer on this list. And Call Me By Your Name is one of the best LGBTQ movies of the past decade.
Arguably, Under the Skin is an LGBT movie, depending on the readings that some of the writings on it.
True. So, HT, you have my back on this one. This was on my list. I think Call Me By Your Name is an absolute masterpiece.
Yay.
Yeah, the silence means we win, right? The silence means it gets you pumped up, right?
I'm about to make an admission here. I still haven't seen this movie.
Come on, guys.
I know, but I'm not going to fight it. So, yeah. Go ahead.
Chris, Brad, Ben, why do you hate this wonderful movie?
I don't hate this wonderful movie. I actually love this movie, and it did come awfully close to getting into my top 50. But there were just other movies that I still love more. But when I saw this movie at Sundance, Michael Stuhlbarg's piece at the end brought me to tears. It's such a beautiful love story, and like everything HT said, Armie Hammer and Timothée Chalamet are outstanding in it. It's gorgeously shot. Like it makes you want to go visit all the places you see in this movie, and it really is an exquisite movie. It just wasn't on my list, but I am all for it being on the top 100.
Chris and Ben, why do you hate this movie?
Chris, go ahead.
No, I like this movie. It's just I like other movies more, and that's why it wasn't on my list. But
it's kind of where I am too.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, at the end of the day, I would be happy to have this on the site's collective list. It wouldn't be on my personal list, but I think it's a good enough movie that it certainly it deserves the passionate response that it gets from its you know, most beloved fans. So I would not have any problem with this.
Chris, yay or nay?
No, I don't object. Put it on there.
Call by your name. Welcome to the top 100. Brad, you're up next. What do you nominate?
Whew. I thought about doing what Peter did and going hard right out of the gate, but I feel like I want to take it easy at first. So I'm going to go with Before Midnight. I think this movie is fantastic because not only does it come after these two outstanding romances that have been spaced 9 years apart from each other, between these two people who just happen to find each other. But I think Before Midnight does this amazing thing where it allows you to feel the weight of what came before it, even if you haven't seen Before Sunrise and Before Sunset. So even though the first movie gives you this sudden random romance where they spend this amazing time together only to part ways, and then the second movie brings them back to experience that romance in a new way and see if that spark is still there. The third movie just gives you reality, and it sets in, and it's this fantastic exploration and portrait of what a romance is like after what appears to be, the quote-unquote happy ending, even if it's not necessarily them coming together at the end, because they don't really after those first two movies. But Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy in Before Midnight, they have such incredible chemistry, and the way that they play this movie is it just feels so authentic. They feel like a real married couple, and it comes with all of the love and hardships that a relationship that has spanned such a long period of time brings to the table. And I think that there's so much passion in this movie for what a relationship is and what love is, and not in a typical Hollywood romance kind of way. And on top of that, it's gorgeously shot. Richard Linklater has always proven he knows exactly, where to put a camera and how to shoot stunning landscapes, especially with these movies, taking place in different spots around the world. But it's just so moving. And this is a movie where I loved it so much when I saw it at Sundance. I actually took the time on my last day to go see it again. And it's stuck with me ever since then. And I treasure it.
All right. This movie had 3 votes. I know it definitely has some fans out there. I haven't seen it, so I'm sitting idly by. I know people love this. I'm not going to stand in its way, though.
I thought I was going to be actually giving my argument for this movie because I dearly love the Before trilogy. It's one of my favorite series of films ever. Before Midnight is actually a movie, not my least favorite of the trilogy, but the one that I've seen the least because it's just so raw and real and uncomfortable to watch. I think I've only seen it twice since it came out, but it is so good, and it gives one of the most searing depictions of an on-screen fight I've ever seen. It's so well done and well staged, and like you said, the Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy just slip right back into the characters that they've been playing for 18 years, like it was just an old coat. And it's just it's such a wonderful film, and I dearly love it. And I think that it can be boiled down to the impact of this film can be boiled down to one line that Ethan Hawke says to Celine, Julie Delpy's character, and it's, "I fucked up my life for the way you sing." And it says so much with so little, and again, it gives all the weight of those past 2 films and those past years in that one line.
All right. Would anybody be opposed to Before Midnight being in top 100? All right. Before Midnight, I'm inducting you in, which brings it to me, and I'm trying to decide if I want to pick my big fight right now, or if I want to go for one I think I have an easier time with. And I'm going to pick my big fight right now, and that is the best Coen Brothers movie, Inside Llewyn Davis, must be on this list. It is everything that defines them as filmmakers. It is so funny. It is so quirky, and it is so raw. And it manages to blend all those things together at once. There are scenes in this movie
that are just powerfully sad while being incredibly hilarious, and the songs are incredible. Oscar Isaac in his best performance yet, like the one that made him Oscar Isaac. The fact that this is a movie about the New York City folk music scene, but it's really about the pain of being an artist, especially when you've lost a collaborator and maybe you're too far ahead of your time or not quite there yet. And I think of this movie all the time because I can't think of another movie that is about an immeasurably talented person who should be at the top of his game, but is maybe a year too early and he's going to be missed. And that devastates me. And the movie also has incredible jackets and an amazing cat performance. Inside Llewyn Davis is a freaking masterpiece.
Yes,
I will agree with that.
Yeah, this is I also think it's the best Coen Brothers movie, although their filmography, I feel like I change what I think their best is every other year, but this one is unbeatable, and it's the movie that Oscar Isaac is so good in it that no one has figured out how to use him well since. Every other film he's made since this has been well, I don't know how to handle this guy, even though he's so good in this, and it's kind of weird. I don't know, but I love this movie.
All right. Is anybody opposed to this one?
I don't love it as much as y'all, but I'm not opposed to it. I do think Oscar Isaac is great in it, as is the soundtrack, and as is that cat.
Here's another movie that I have not seen.
Oh wow, Peter!
I know.
I think you would dig it, Peter. I think you'd really enjoy it.
Just as an aside, I will say that the best Coen Brothers movie is No Country for Old Men, but that's a conversation for another day.
So that is a great one.
I love that one too.
Right.
I'm also not as keen on it as you guys, but I'm not opposed to it being on the list.
Okay. Welcome to the top 100. Okay, we're back to the beginning of the rotation. Ben, nominate something else.
God, I've just been going over this back and forth in my mind. How about The Master, Paul Thomas Anderson's movie that has two of the most outstanding performances of the decade in it, from Joaquin Phoenix, who plays Freddie Quell, this Navy vet who, you thought in Joker that his entire body was contorting and twisting and all of that. He really I feel like Freddie Quell, this character that he plays in The Master, is it's like how this is going to be a deep cut reference for people. It's like how Ben Stiller played that character in Heavyweights before eventually going on to play a very, very similar character in Dodgeball. It's it's like a trial run, and my God, his performance in this movie is just outstanding. And Philip Seymour Hoffman, the late great Philip Seymour Hoffman, is just so charismatic and swaggering as this L. Ron Hubbard-esque figure who runs this Scientology, but not actually Scientology because they couldn't legally say that, kind of cult religion. Amy Adams is incredible in this movie. Anderson cinematography, it's unbelievable. It's a beautiful film. It's about loneliness and trust and deception and belief and power and the struggle between these two men. It's a very masculine movie, but there are these female characters who are sort of dotted throughout it, who also have their own, their own power in their own right. Amy Adams, in particular, has this quiet steeliness in this movie that I think is really powerful. And I think for a guy like Paul Thomas Anderson, I feel like several of his films could make our list of the top 100 of the decade because he's that good. But I think this one is the one that I would be most disappointed if it didn't make the cut.
I agree with Ben.
I didn't like The Master.
Oh, no.
All right.
No.
There is only one Paul Thomas Anderson movie that I deeply, deeply love, and I would fight for it to be on this list. That's Phantom Thread. But
wait, that's the only Paul Thomas Anderson movie that you love?
No.
Yeah. What?
Wait, what?
Of this past decade.
Okay.
Wait, but what about? Oh yeah, I guess. Yeah.
I didn't like Inherent Vice either.
Yeah.
I really hated that.
What?
Actually.
Oh, HT.
No, it's fine.
Okay, go on, HG. I'm sorry I derailed this.
There are parts of The Master I liked, but it's a movie that ended up leaving me cold. I can't really explain why. I've only seen it once, the first time in theaters, and I think I saw it in was it 70 millimeter that it came out in, or something
Yeah, I
along
think so.
those lines. Yeah, and I saw what it was doing with the Scientology metaphor, and I really enjoyed the performances. I think that Philip Seymour Hoffman gives a career best performance. Joaquin Phoenix, amazing, and Amy Adams was the MVP for me actually, because I really enjoyed how the question of who the master is in this movie kind of points to her and her quiet power. But I don't know, there was just something about the master that never really gelled with me, and it's just a movie that I liked parts of but never really enjoyed the entirety of.
Are the performances good enough for you to vote it in anyway, HT?
I mean, like, I understand it's in like everyone's best of the decade list, and I kind of assumed it would probably be on here. So yeah, sure, it's fine.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say I don't really like the master, and I'm sorry.
I have to say I agree with HT. I'm a huge Paul Thomas Anderson fan. I was looking forward to this. I was at this point like obsessed in Scientology and reading all the books and watching all the documentaries and doing all that. And I think my expectations for this movie were just. It was one of those movies that I was expecting. I wanted something different, and I went in expecting something different than what I got. But what I got, those performances are amazing, and I think those performances are on a level that it should be included on this list. But I'm with you, HT. Yeah.
I think it was just very obscure in what it was trying to say, and that obscurity was something that I didn't really enjoy.
All right, I think that's fair, but it also sounds like Peter and HT, if I'm reading you correctly, you would be begrudgingly okay with being bumped up.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move the master into the top 100. Chris, your turn to nominate a movie.
My pick is The Irishman from Martin Scorsese. It is the culmination of his life's work. And even though he's going to make movies after this, and I hope he continues to make movies for another 50 years, even though I know that's impossible, this feels like it's like the end of an era. It's everything he has to say about movies and mob movies and his career in general all rolled into one epic.
Yeah, I was hesitant about this because it's so recent, like so incredibly recent, but I ended up making my list because, yeah, it's a culmination of one of the master filmmakers of all time's careers, and it's a punctuation mark. I think it's important.
I love Scorsese. Goodfellas and Casino and all his mob movies and stuff like that. Watching this movie, I love where he gets to, what the point of this movie is. But I felt bored while watching it. So I don't know. I guess I'm saying that it wouldn't even be in my top 10 of the year.
Wow. You're canceled, Peter.
It probably wouldn't be in my top 10 of the year either. Peter, I talked about this on the water cooler a little bit last week. I also really love where it gets to and those final messages, but I think it lost me a little bit along the way, so you're not completely alone there. But can I propose something radical? Because of the way that Chris just described The Irishman as like the culmination of Scorsese's career, it got me thinking about Avengers Endgame and how that's the culmination of the MCU. I wonder, and especially with like the whole, obviously the Marty versus Marvel kind of thing, can we just go ahead and induct Endgame and The Irishman and like call it a day for like not end the episode, but put both of those movies in our top 100 and call it at that, because I feel like that would be there's something poetic about that.
I'm totally cool with that. It gets more on this list. We need to get this list moving. So
yeah, it means I don't have to argue for Avengers Endgame.
This is a trap. This is a trap because I don't want Avengers Endgame on here, but now I have to say yes. Well played, Ben. Fine. I agree to this.
Okay, welcome to the top 100 Avengers Endgame and The Irishman. Because you know what? Why can't we be friends, all of us? Peter, you're up next.
Well, I was honestly going to have Avengers Endgame next, but so I'm going to...
I knew you would, so yeah. I'm just cutting it straight out.
Yeah, good job, Ben. Good job. Okay, you know what? I'm going to jump to documentary because we haven't talked about documentaries here for this list yet. And this documentary premiered at Sundance. It's Exit Through the Gift Shop. It was directed by Banksy. Was it directed by Banksy? Maybe it was directed by Banksy. We don't even know. But this documentary is about art. It's about street art. It's about the value of art. It's there's this so much. It's such a peek into this world of street art and the value of that we put on these things. But it's also interesting because it's a movie that I revisit and ask questions about how much of it's real. Is Mr. Brainwash a real person? I feel like it's such an interesting documentary because it has so many layers to it. So that's, and this would personally be in my top 5 of the last 10 years.
Didn't make my list, but I like it a lot. I'm cool with it.
I haven't seen it, so I don't have anything to say. I heard it's good.
See it.
I know.
It was on my list, so I am down with this.
Chris and Brad, did you guys have opinions on this one?
I want to see this one exit through the back door and not on the list. No, I'm kidding. I'm like HT. I actually haven't gotten around to seeing this movie yet. I've been putting it off for years, so I actually don't have an opinion. And I think that I do remember the cultural swell around it and just how fascinated everyone was with it. And the fact that I think everyone knows who Banksy is largely because of his presence and because of this documentary. I think that it's definitely worthy of being on the decade list.
Brad, you would love this movie. I know this for a fact.
Fair enough.
Chris, yay or nay?
Oh, man, it's fine. Let's go. Let's move on. Let's go. Put it on the list.
All right. So next up in the rotation is HT.
All right. I'm going to go for another animated movie, and I'm going to go for How to Train Your Dragon, which I believe is one of the the best animated movie of the decade, and one of the best movies of the decade. It's a film that follows Hiccup, who is a sort of pacifist, timid Viking in a village full of Vikings who are at odds with and try to defeat dragons. And he ends up befriending a dragon that is injured and creating a wing for it, so that this dragon, Toothless, kind of ends up relying on Hiccup. And it's this beautiful, lovely little boy and his dragon story that is just such a wonderful little story that is beautifully shot. Roger Deakins consulted for this film, and it's one of the most cinematic animated films that we've ever seen. And I think that it's just a testament to CG animation, as well as just a beautiful little coming of age story about a boy and his dragon.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not, HT.
Wow.
Whoa!
Are you kidding?
I'm not kidding. This movie is okay. Hiccup.
What?
Toothless is very cute.
Oh boy.
Otherwise, the animation is obnoxious. The character designs are obnoxious. It's loud.
Wow.
Jacob, are we talking
You're
about the
wrong,
same movie?
Yeah.
I know you hated How to Train Your Dragon 2, which is fair. There are some problems with it, but How to Train Your Dragon is pretty much a perfect movie.
Look, I know I'm in the minority here, so we only get 2 votes from the group, though. But if all of you guys rally around HT and say, Jacob, you're wrong, and boo, hiss at me, and bump it up, that's totally fine. But I'm sticking my piece right here.
I'll say a couple things.
I haven't seen it. So.
Oh, wow.
I haven't seen any of those movies, no.
Well, if it helps, Chris, the dragons are modeled off after, I think, both dogs and cats. So they are so cute, and they act like real pets. So just let you know.
I hate cute things.
But you love animals.
No, I'm kidding. I love cute things. I'm a big softie, but I just haven't seen these.
I would say it's one of the few movies that uses the 3D technology to an emotional effect. It is such a part of us. I mean, the Slash Filmcast uses the song from the movie as their part of their theme song.
Oh, does
Yeah,
it?
but that's not us, Peter. We're different than the Slash Filmcast.
Well, that's true.
I'll give this. It's a pretty rad score. I do have the soundtrack, and I do listen to it on occasion. I just wish it never balances the humor and the drama and the tension for me. Whenever the other characters open their friggin' mouths, it's just comedians screaming, and I can't stand it. But I'm willing to step aside here because clearly HT's passionate, and I have my own personal picks that I know she or other people are going to say absolutely not to. So I will step aside if everybody else is okay with this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. We finally have that one in there. Okay, Brad, you are up next. Nominate something.
I'm gonna go for What We Do in the Shadows. This movie was close to being to the top, if not at the top of the cumulative slash film list the year that it was released. So there's definitely a support for it. I don't know if necessarily the team was the same back then, because I think this was at a time when before a couple of the team right now was on board. But this is easily one of the best comedies of the decade, if not the best comedy. Over the years, Taika Waititi has proven that he is a master when it comes to comedy and satire. And this movie came at a time when I feel like the mockumentary was maybe running its course a little bit. The Office had already been doing it well for a while, and it was something that Parks and Recreation as well. And it just seemed like, what more can we do with this? But man, Taika comes in, and not only does he do something new with a mockumentary, but he does something great with vampires, which were also really just at the end of their rope at that point, thanks to Twilight and the influx of vampire movies. This movie is absolutely hilarious, but it also has some very touching things as far as friendships are concerned. I think that this movie has one of the best ensemble casts of a comedy this decade. There's really nothing more I can say to it except that this movie is just when it defied expectations, went against the grain by being something that people thought probably wouldn't work, but it's just outstanding all around.
Absolutely. Yes, this movie is a masterpiece. I've watched this movie more times than any other movie released in this past decade. I put it on when I'm feeling in a bad mood. I put it on while I work. I put it on while I'm exercising. I find this movie to be the most comforting film of its kind, because it is so funny and so warm, and because I'm a weirdo, so incredibly bloody and violent that I find it works for me. It's just, I love that the comedy feeds into the vampire world. It is not making fun of the vampire world. It is about vampires who are, idiots living in a world that kind of makes sense. And I think it respects comedy and horror in a way, in a balance that is incredibly satisfying. And I think What We Do in the Shadows is my pick for the straight up most entertaining film of the past decade. And I really strongly believe it belongs on this list.
Wow.
I was about to say,
I don't even think this is the
hot takes 2 in a row.
I don't even think this is the third best Taika Waititi movie of the last decade.
How does that feel to be wrong, Peter?
So here's my thing with this. This movie is very funny, but from a filmmaking standpoint, I think it's kind of whatever. And I feel like you can make, quote unquote mockumentaries cinematically engaging, as, believe it or not, the Unfriended movies prove, which are just Searching, which are, computer screens that somehow are very cinematic. And I feel like the filmmaking in this movie,
I think this movie is incredibly cinematic, but in a way that you don't necessarily realize, because I think it captures a sort of gothic style, but puts it in a contemporary kind of setting where you get the feel that, like, you could easily be inside of an old castle or something like that, but it's just a rundown shitty house. And the way it's shot in darkness and things like this, I think it really heightens it, and it makes it feel that much more like a real documentary if it were that.
I can see that.
Yeah, I think that the detached modern mockumentary style, combined with the lavish costumes and sets, makes for this collision of styles that shouldn't work but ends up working. And I Brad and I seem to be alone here, and I'm really worried about that, because this movie is absolutely in my top 10.
Yeah, I'm worried. I'm worried too.
I will say this, I am the comedy curmudgeon on this podcast. I feel like the comedy in this film is a little bit too broad at times for me. It's just my taste. So that just might be me.
All right.
I mean, I think it's a very funny movie. I don't have any problem with the comedy, but
I hated this movie when I saw it and laughed maybe once in the entire thing, but I saw it on a plane. So maybe that had something to do with it, and my hatred is far outweighed by the passion that you guys have already explained. So I even though I despise this movie, I know I need to A, probably give it another chance, and B, ultimately I'm fine with it being on a group list if multiple people are passionate about it.
I want to give Ben the nickname of the intermittent comedy curmudgeon, because sometimes he just comes out with these like opinions about comedies. I'm like, wait, what? I would not have expected you to hate this movie, Ben.
I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was the plane or what, but yeah, I didn't really think it was that funny. I don't know.
Wait, so should we approve this or should we table it?
I mean,
put it on there.
I would say it's fine because Brad and because Jacob has it so high and Brad clearly loves it as well.
I also have it so high. It's also in my top 10.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, it's tough to argue against that.
I like what we do in the shadows. Yeah, I like what we do in the shadows. I think it's very funny. It's not in my top 50 personally, and I do have another Taika Waititi movie in there, but I think it's fine. It's it's a great mockumentary, and it does well with what it has, and the jokes are great. So yeah, I'm fine with it.
Okay, I think we got the in by the skin of our teeth. Brad, we got lucky there.
Thankfully.
But it is me next, and I'm gonna make a weird little compromise here. I had initially nominated John Wick Chapter 2, but I noticed that John Wick, the first one, has 2 nominations, so it has more support. So I'm going to propose that I eliminate Chapter 2 from this list. I put my weight behind John Wick Chapter 1. We put John Wick Chapter 1 in the list because it is the best American action film of the past decade. It is the perfect blend of comic book storytelling and like old school fight choreography. It is fresh. It is modern. It is everything you want in this type of movie. It is satisfying. It is a satisfying, like, big pile of Hollywood meats that you just bury your face in. Is anybody monstrous enough to say John Wick does not belong on this list?
No, not in the least.
I love the silencer shootout in the second one. That would be like that moment is so strong that it almost makes me want to fight for the entire second movie over the whole first movie. But ultimately, I think I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I think 2 is my favorite of the 3 films. But I think that in order to keep this nice and clean, and I think putting the first John Wick on there just can make the most people happy, and that makes me happy to have any John Wicks on there.
Yep.
I'm fine with that.
John Wick, welcome to the list. Brings us back to Ben. Ben, let's we're definitely running long, so Ben, let's try to keep like 1 or 2 sentences per movie to try to keep us going. So Ben, give us your quick sell on that movie.
Fast 5, mother effers. That's got to be in here because the Fast and Furious franchise is like one of the most important franchises of the 2010s. It's the film that introduced The Rock into the franchise. I have my own personal feelings on The Rock and how they've dropped drastically over the course of this decade, but I think at this point in looking back at the decade cumulatively, this is the movie that changed the game for the Fast and Furious franchise, and it's so much fun. It's so like testosterone fueled and over the top and truly, truly ridiculous. Paul Walker, the late Paul Walker, is like really good in this movie, and I think more than any other film in the franchise, this is the one that proves that he was the glue that holds this whole thing together. So Fast 5. Anybody going to shoot me down on that? I'm sure somebody is.
You are the only person that put this on any of the lists, but you mentioning it makes me think that I should have put this on my list. So I'm going to back you up on this one. I think this was one of the funnest movies of the last decade.
It's a blast. It didn't make my list, but this is a case where, Ben, when you wrote your top 10 of all time for the site, this was on that. So how can I argue against it? How can I argue against Fast 5 when you love it that much? It's a lot of fun. Sure, let's do it.
No. Not a single one of those movies belongs on this list. Come on.
The best Fast and Furious movie is not in this decade. It was Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. And I'm going to stand on that ship. But you know what? Fast 5 is good. It's fine.
I don't remember. I've seen this movie. I don't remember a single goddamn thing from it. Absolutely not.
They drag safes through the streets in the end. It's great.
Yeah, you don't remember the chase through the favelas and like.
No.
Oh, Chris, these are cinematic moments of glory you can't recall.
Nothing in those movies is real. It's all just computer shit.
They actually, Justin Lin actually tied a freaking safe to the back of those cars and smashed buildings in Rio with it. So I will have you know.
All right.
The
I
safe
still say
scene
no.
is better than any of like the escalating action scenes that follow in the franchise. So I will actually now give my support because that safe scene rules.
I'm so upset.
I'm with Chris. If I were going to be forced to put any Fast and Furious movie on a best of the decade list, it would probably be Furious 7.
What?
Yeah, I like Furious 7. I think that's the best of the franchise. I think Fast 5 is great for bringing The Rock into the franchise, but beyond that, I honestly don't think that it's what I would call one of the greatest action movies of the decade. So I'm with Chris.
Ben, I'm going to put this into our in discussion section for now.
Okay.
So go ahead and pick another one, and we'll come back to Fast 5 in a little bit.
How about Annihilation?
Yes.
Alex Garland's mind-bending movie that is about self-destruction and depression and heading into the shimmer, which is this mysterious bubble that is very 2001-esque. I don't think any other movie has come as close to capturing this sort of otherworldly sense, like combination of dread and beauty that 2001 elicited in me than Annihilation. I think it has terrific performances and just like what a visual stunner of a movie, and like the final confrontation between Natalie Portman and the other Natalie Portman is like it's haunting and mesmerizing. So Annihilation, how about that?
This was my next pick, Peter. My next pick, Ben. So you have this is a absolute sci-fi classic, up there with Arrival and all the other films we have on the list already.
I'm honestly shocked that only half of us put this on the list.
There's a screaming bear in it, for God's sake. Come on, what more do people need?
This was another one that came close for me, but it barely got eked out.
I say
I
yes.
have no problem with this, yeah.
Annihilation was a movie that left me surprisingly a little cold because I thought I would like it a lot more. I even saw it twice in theaters because I was wondering if I missed something. It's another movie I liked parts of. I really enjoyed the part with Tessa Thompson's character turning into a flower. That part really spoke to me. And the rest of it, like, I really enjoyed the imagery, but yeah, I mean, it's not my personal favorite, but I'm fine with it going on the list.
We put your dragon picture on there. We'll get the.
It's a good movie, Jacob. You're wrong.
Put your damn dragon movie on.
I like how Jacob called it a picture, like he was like channeling Martin Scorsese or something.
All right. Well, Annihilation gets slid in there, which brings us to Chris. Your next pick.
Oh, shit. Sorry. I'm unprepared. Let's do...
Bridge of Spies.
No, I'm gonna pick another Spielberg movie, and that is Lincoln, which is phenomenal. It could have been a stuffy biopic, and instead of doing a full Lincoln life thing, it picks out a certain chunk of his time. The script by Tony Kushner is surprisingly hilarious. It's so funny. Daniel Day-Lewis is phenomenal as Lincoln. This cast is through the roof. It's like pretty much every recognizable male character actor working today is in this movie. I love Lincoln. I'm picking Lincoln.
Yeah, Lincoln.
Chris, would you say that you want to put on this list now?
Yes.
I think Lincoln's the best Spielberg movie of the past decade, like unquestionably. This is another movie I put on and enjoy. I like to luxuriate in this movie. It is really good actors playing frequently good people, doing good things against really bad people, and that just and hands Spielberg that's so incredibly satisfying.
See, I don't disagree with anything you guys said. Like, it is the best Spielberg. It has great performances. It's a phenomenal movie, but like, I don't even care to ever watch it again.
I think The Post is better than Lincoln personally, but I don't have a problem with Lincoln being put on this list.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it either.
Yeah, I do think that the movie is best by virtue of Daniel Day-Lewis's amazing performance, but yeah, I don't have a problem with it on here.
Yeah. So Peter, are you okay with this, Peter?
Yeah, I'm fine.
All right. That's Lincoln. Next up is Peter. You're up.
I'm curious what people are going to say about this one. I don't think anybody else voted for this movie. But this is the movie it's one of the movies I think I've seen the most. I've rewatched the most, and I'm not sure what that says about me as a person. But this is the 2014 film Nightcrawler from Dan Gilroy, and this stars Jake Gyllenhaal, and he is a what would you call him? He's like an ambulance chaser. Like he's chasing to try to get the story of like he's not a journalist. He's a videographer who's trying to sell if it
like
bleeds.
a tabloid.
Yeah.
Photographer.
And it kind of shows the ethical quandary of that profession. And also, like, I feel like even though this is like a character study of this one guy, it's a great performance. It's so well shot. It presents, it's one of those movies that's up there with like Drive of showing LA, like the nighttime LA for what it is, in this decade. And, but the thing about this, I feel like it speaks to a larger thing. It speaks to us as journalists. It speaks to documentary. It talks about reality shows. It's speaking of like, how we present things to tell the story that we want to tell. And maybe not the story that exists, maybe the better story that's going to get more butts and seats, get more clicks. I don't know. I really like Nightcrawler. And it also has, wasn't that like Riz Ahmed, one of his first performances?
Yeah. It was definitely his breakout role.
Yeah.
And Peter, this almost made my list. I agree. It barely missed my list. So I am totally cool with this being on our top 100.
This one made my list, so I'm there with you too.
This one also almost made my list, but did not. So I'm all for it as well.
All right, here no more objections. So that is Nightcrawler. Next up in the rotation is HT.
All right. Well, since we got the master in there, I have to go to bat for my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movie, Phantom Thread. This is a gothic romance/comedy that I really enjoyed for its twisted depiction of the strange codependent relationship that I think fulfills a lot of what gothic romance conventions try to do. It's very in the vein of Jane Eyre and Rebecca, and gives a modern twisted sensibility to it in sort of deconstructing how poisonous and how toxic these kind of relationships really are. And Daniel Day-Lewis is excellent in it, as is Vicky Krieps. And I just absolutely love this movie. I think it's hilarious, too. I did not expect it to be as much of a comedy as it is. And it's just the Paul Thomas Anderson movie that I really enjoyed from the past decade. And if you guys have a master on there, I am going to fight for this one. Phantom Thread.
I have no objection.
I support Phantom Thread on this list. Yes.
Yeah, I love Phantom Thread as well. I actually would, if we were ranking this, I would put it higher than The Master as well, and so I think it deserves to be on this list.
Yeah.
I didn't really like it much, and I hate saying that.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan either.
I don't understand. I mean, I guess I understand why you guys don't like it, but you guys are wrong, so whatever.
Well, HT likes dragon movies, but in her Peter and Ben, is this an area we're moved to the discussion zone, or is there an enthusiasm enough for you guys to level it up?
God, there's so many more movies that we have to do, and I'm gonna be mad that we're gonna have to cut something.
I say we're approving so much. I say put it in discussion. Like, I don't think it's like out. No.
Put it in discussion, and
honestly, every Paul Thomas Anderson movie released in the last decade should be on the list. I'm just going to say that right now, and if you disagree, you are wrong.
All right, with 1/3 of the table saying it should be put into discussion, I'm moving it there for now. HT, pick again.
All right, fine. Well, I am not prepared for this one, so I'm just going to look through and figure out what I'm going to put in. And I guess I'll put this one. Probably will go up. Creed. This is the movie that rebooted the Rocky franchise. Starred Michael B. Jordan as Adonis Creed, the son of Apollo Creed, and kind of followed the vein of Force Awakens in creating sort of this reboot but creating its own story and hitting a lot of those nostalgic notes, but doing it in a way that made almost a much better film than a lot of the Rocky films. Not as probably as good as the first Rocky, but Ryan Coogler really puts his own timely modern spin on this and makes it feel so energetic and alive and now. And Michael B. Jordan is excellent in this role as well, as is Sylvester Stallone, who gives a real wary performance that I really enjoyed and didn't expect to see from him. So that's Creed.
Made my list. It's great. Love it.
I approve.
I just looked and this was not on my list, but it should have been, so I approve as well.
Yeah.
Brad, I know Brad loved this movie, right?
I do love Creed. Yeah, I don't have any problem with this being on there at all because Creed was definitely in my list for negotiation, just did not crack the top 50.
Chris, why do you hate Creed?
Creed is on my list. I don't hate it.
Is Creed on everyone's list?
It was on half of our lists. But it sounds like more people. I think everybody likes Creed. You didn't make the list. So, okay, Brad, you're up next.
Okay. You know what? I don't see any horror on this list yet, so I'm going to go to bat for Cabin in the Woods. Having just recently rewatched it, my mind was refreshed of just how brilliant this movie was. I love how it plays with the tropes of horror movies and does something original with them. I think the cast is outstanding. I think that it's very funny while also being incredibly horrific and suspenseful and bloody and has so many cool horror movie references. I love Bradley Whitford and Richard Jenkins in this movie. It's just a great movie that kind of encompasses all of what horror is and plays with it in a way that is as brilliant as what Wes Craven did with Scream, I think.
Yeah, this is going to be my next pick, Brad. I think this is a horror movie about horror movies, which sounds like it could be, pretentious, but it's not. It's an absolute blast, and it's just the idea that in the Cabin in the Woods universe, every single horror movie you've ever seen is also a Cabin in the Woods sequel is fascinating and wonderful. This is one of my favorite movies of the past 10 years.
It's great.
Any objections?
No.
No, I like Cabin in the Woods. It's good.
Okay, Cabin in the Woods. So next up is me. Like I said, I was going to pick Cabin in the Woods next, so I have to move on. I want to go with the best live-action Wes Anderson movie, The Grand Budapest Hotel. This is just an encapsulation of everything Anderson's been building toward, his sort of dollhouse aesthetic, his use of stop motion for backgrounds, the use of colors and different aspect ratios to maximize or minimize what you're looking at. And in a decade like this, there's probably nothing more important than a movie about the rise of fascism, where everybody is too concerned about themselves to see it coming and let total idiots gain power in a way that starts truly hurting and damaging people in society. So it's a bitter pill smuggled into this really frothy, beautiful, fun Wes Anderson film. And I think it's only got 2 votes from us, but I think that we should reconsider this and it should be in the top 100.
I had Moonrise Kingdom on my list, but I am going to change it to support you and Grand Budapest Hotel because this movie is really good.
I was the second vote for Grand Budapest Hotel, and I do think it's the superior Wes Anderson film of the 2 on the list. So, yes.
Anyone else?
Put it on there. I like
I'm
this
fine with
movie.
it.
I just didn't put it on my list.
Okay, that's Grand Budapest Hotel, locking in to the top 100. Well, as we expected, this is running much longer than we thought it would. So welcome to a marathon series, guys. We're going to have a cliffhanger here. We have a little over 30 films locked in. We're going to hopefully finish this tomorrow in a second episode. So I'm going to hand the baton back to Peter, who will sign us off, and come back tomorrow as we finalize our list. And I think we're all very tired and need to take a little breather. So, Peter, to you.
Yeah, who thought I was going to take this long? I don't know. You can find more of all of our work at slashfilm.com. You can find this podcast published every weekday on iTunes, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. I promise we will get back to the news when the news gets back to us because it's holiday season and things are slow. But we're going to have some good specials for you coming up. Send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. And please rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow.